I guess this is the battle for second place in the NBA's MVP. It's been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was like minus 250 a couple months ago. Then last month it was 3-1. I mean, it's now up to minus 440 here.
Voter fatigue is a real thing, but there is a chance for him to maybe go on a hot tear, go on a stretch that maybe opens the conversation back up a little bit. I wouldn't say Shai's completely out of the woods just yet.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
You watch playoff games. The playoffs are all that matter. The league's got an issue. They just don't want to admit it. They brag about how huge they are, how global they are. Ratings are through the roof. Profits are through the roof. I mean, between the NBA and NHL lying about their ratings and the money they make, I'm sick and tired of it.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than game time decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I talked about AZ Fudd a lot, folks, and said when she got back from that knee injury, remember, it's the second ACL tear she's had in her career, that she was going to be a difference maker. UConn is plus 330. They're not going to get challenged again in the Big East until they come out of conference play in the conference tournament. I still like them at plus 330 to win a national championship.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Hello and welcome to a Friday Live right here on the Early Line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. That includes sportsgrid.com/watch, where you can find your favorite destination to consume everything all across the grid. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. We are here together on this Friday for the next 3 hours, up until 11 a.m. Eastern Time. A Friday morning to look back on an exciting Thursday night. The Four Nations Face-Off Championship inside TD Garden between the bitter border rivals. My voice a little bit hoarse, the sleep not nearly as long because the game went to overtime. All of our reactions from the ice last night between the Canada and U.S. matchup, but DRS, of course, not the celebration the Americans were hoping for on this Friday morning. A lot of college basketball to preview with huge games on this Friday. More to come on Saturday. Even more after that on a Sunday. In the NBA with a 9-game slate last night around the association. Officially back from the All-Star break. But some big news in basketball for one of the biggest bigs that you will ever see. A lot to break down throughout these 3 hours.
Absolutely. And last night, I loved watching the pageantry of Canada versus the United States, enjoyed the first period. Then I fell asleep and woke up and saw that it was an overtime thriller and Canada won that game. I still haven't been able to watch to see actually how they won it because I am my own IT department here at the SportsGrid Network. So we'll get to that. We'll have some fun and enjoy these 3 hours together.
Yes, we certainly will. So, DRS, let me break down how Canada won the Four Nations Face-Off Championship in the inaugural tournament of this event. In overtime, tied at 2 apiece, a flurry of action. Jordan Binnington, Canada's goaltender, standing on his head in Beantown as he did back in Game 7 of the 2019 Cup Final to lead the Blues to a Stanley Cup over the Boston Bruins, denying Austin Matthews time and again. And just a few minutes later, on the other side, the best hockey player on planet Earth right now, Connor McDavid delivers for Canada. The overtime winner to give the Canadians the first ever title in the Four Nations face-off. 3-2 the victory for the Canadians. Oh, Canada is right. What an atmosphere and environment it was inside TD Garden. What a tournament in the Four Nations face-off overall. But our neighbors up north get the victory last night inside TD Garden.
Yeah, it was great. Like for a whole week, like we were actually talking about hockey. The players cared about it. It was sensational stuff. And by the way, in hour number 3, we have a great Fade the Public poll, which is going exactly the way I thought it would go. And also, I probably will not be fading the public at that point either. So make sure you check out and get your votes in on that. But I enjoyed it because hockey is a really, really good sport played at the top end of the spectrum, which is what you saw last night on the ice. You could buy in nation versus nation. Fantastic stuff. I thought it was great. I don't know if we ever can go back to an All-Star game, but also, can you always just replicate what you got out of Canada and the U.S. here? I don't know if you can do that in the future. Maybe you can, but for 1 week, it was lights out fantastic.
And that's kind of the overall takeaway, right? Canada gets a victory in a best-on-best international tournament, still the best hockey nation in the world, in front of the United States and others. And Connor McDavid on full display, scoring the overtime game winner for the Canadians. We'll talk to our Canadian colleague, Joe Madden, in a little bit to recap everything we saw in the Four Nations face-off. But for me, Donnie, if we can just take a moment, thank the National Hockey League and its players to agreeing to put on this tournament, to have that buy-in, to make it feel exciting. It's something we often lose in sports, putting the fans and the purity of the sport first and foremost. That's what we saw on display the last week and a half in this Four Nations face-off. Elsewhere around the sports landscape, big NBA news yesterday afternoon. On the first full day after the All-Star break, bad news for the San Antonio Spurs. A blood clot in his shoulder. Victor Wembanyama has been ruled out for the remainder of this season. A incredibly successful sophomore campaign, DRS, for Wemby. An all-star for the first time in his NBA career just this past weekend. But now due to that deep vein thrombosis, otherwise known as a blood clot, Wembanyama out for the remainder of this season.
Yeah, it's a shame, too, because certainly coming into his own year number 2 in the NBA, the Spurs trying to make the playoffs, maybe do some damage as that next young and up-and-coming team, and now it's completely thwarted here until we get to next year. Our only hope is that this isn't a long-term issue for Victor Wembanyama.
Right.
Get it cleared out now. They weren't the number 1 overall seed. He wasn't having the MVP season. So if there's ever a time to shut down a young player, this would be the time it would be. Hopefully he's back next year, back to 100%, and even on a higher level than he currently is.
Listen, blood clots are a very scary thing for athletes or just anybody. You will hope it is just a one-off. That has been the prognosis from San Antonio as a franchise. But that is the hope, that Victor Wembanyama sits out the remainder of this season and is back healthy next year and for many more years to come. 21 years old, played 46 of 52 games for the Spurs this season, was running away with Defensive Player of the Year and that hardware, leading the NBA in blocks at 3.8 blocks per game. But now DRS will not hit that minimum that he needs to be considered for those postseason honors. 9-game slate around the NBA last night, including a Spurs victory in Austin, spoiling the homecoming of Kevin Durant back inside the Moody Center where he played his college basketball. The Spurs were an underdog. And then how about LeBron James? He's not taking nights off on a back-to-back. Scores 40 points to lead the Lakers to a victory and a cover in Portland, becoming the first ever player with multiple 40-point games at the age of 40. The Celtics roll in Philadelphia. The Knicks edge out the Bulls at home inside MSG in overtime. All of that highlighting our Thursday night slate.
Yeah, we'll get to all these games. Just quickly on the Philadelphia 76ers, they get pounded at home by the Boston Celtics and also Joel Embiid admits after the game, yeah, my knee, I really can't be dominant because it hurts. So get ready for the shutdown in Philadelphia. And also, Luka Doncic comes over to the Lakers, and maybe Luka's the issue here as the ultimate losers. LeBron's like, I'll do it myself. We don't need your 1 for 9 every night from three-point range to help us lose basketball games. And also, the Phoenix Suns, we might as well start talking about them actually tanking the season out as well.
For sure.
Amazing. All this talent around the NBA and some really bad performances.
Phoenix, the worst cover team in the NBA, on full display last night. A team that continues to stay hot. 13 consecutive home victories. That would be the 20th ranked Maryland Terrapins. DRS, you've heard of the Fab Five. How about the Crab Five? The starting lineup for Maryland last night, scoring 85 of the 88 total points for the Terps as they roll over USC and cover as an 11.5-point home favorite.
USC, aren't you glad you joined the Big Ten to go coast to coast in games and get absolutely smashed by Maryland? Hey, home court advantage, use it to your advantage. Maryland did that last night.
11 points for all 5 in that starting lineup for Kevin Willard. That's the 6th game this year that all starters have been in double figures for Maryland, the most among high major programs. A future Hall of Famer hangs it up after 11 NFL seasons. Zach Martin, the Dallas Cowboys offensive guard, one of the best interior O-linemen in the NFL in the last decade plus, retires after 11 seasons. A 7-time first-team All-Pro, a 9-time Pro Bowler. And DRS, how about this stat that was circulating yesterday? More Pro Bowl nods in his 11-year NFL career than accepted holding penalties against Martin.
Yeah, one of the best all-time to do it. But also understand this, people. I have just as many NFC Championship and Super Bowl appearances as Zach Martin does, so congratulations to everybody. We're all the same. We're all athletes together.
Body's not even cold yet in his NFL career. And probably even the best stat, the 2013 Pinstripe Bowl MVP, Zach Martin, first offensive lineman to win a bowl game, most valuable player since 1959. What a stat find from our guy Joe Frizo. Aaron Boone extended by the Yankees through 2027. Sure, everybody throughout the greater New York City area thrilled with that.
I heard Juan Soto said the reason why he left the Yankees because Aaron Boone was coming back. Could that be? Did I hear correctly? Am I an insider? Could be.
Whoa, hey-ho, 7 seasons as the Yankees manager, fresh off a World Series appearance. Speaking of that World Series, the champs looked awful yesterday in the spring training debut. The Dodgers get beat by the Cubs bad, 12-4 in the spring training opener. Around the association for Thursday on a Friday. Next.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the 2 best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I talked about AZ Fun a lot, folks, and said when she got back from that knee injury, remember, it's the second ACL tear she's had in her career, that she was going to be a difference maker. UConn is plus 330. They're not going to get challenged again in the Big East until they come out of conference play in a conference tournament. I still like them at plus 330 to win a national championship.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I feel when I look at this Arizona team, I don't take them serious as a national title threat because you're asking Caleb Love to bottle magic that I just don't even think exists.
4.4, 6.6, 7.4, 7.7, 7.8. This guy is literally taking, he'll shoot you out of games, Kevin.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the Early Line. It is a Friday morning, now officially in that stretch run of the 2024-25 NBA campaign. Everybody back from the All-Star break as of tonight. A 9-game slate around the association yesterday. But DRS, before we get to the actual games that we saw, some huge news on the first full day after the All-Star break out of San Antonio for a first-time All-Star for the Spurs. That would be Victor Wembanyama, the generational talent, having a generational season in his second campaign in the NBA, is now out for the remainder of this year. A blood clot in his shoulder will sideline Wemby for the remainder of this season. As we said in the open, you hope it is a one-off. San Antonio feels as though that is the case, but anytime you are dealing with blood clots, athletes or otherwise, it can be a scary incident. The Spurs have decided at this moment to shut down Victor Wembanyama for the remainder of this season, hoping a very long, illustrious, and successful NBA career awaits, beginning once again next year.
Yeah, smart moves. I mean, what are we doing here? It's not a life and death situation on the court. It's life and death off the court here. Quality of life. You settle him down. You take his mind off it, because I've never been diagnosed, and many people probably haven't either, with a blood clot, but it's got to be one of the more scary diagnoses that you can have, because at any moment can that thing actually pass through, get to the heart, get to the brain. So thank goodness that sometimes these top level athletes, and rightfully so, get world-class health care. Well, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling right. My shoulder doesn't feel good, as opposed to most everybody in their day-to-day life. Hey, I got to go to work today. I can't afford to take off and go to a doctor. Some people have the luxury, like Wembanyama, to say, you know what? Let me run through a battery of tests, and thank goodness they absolutely caught that here, because that would have been devastating, certainly for the San Antonio Spurs. But now you get a chance to say, okay, it's not a shame in things where we're in the number one seed, we're heading towards the playoffs, we're going to win a championship. As I said before, if there's any time to have a minor setback here to your career, this is the time to do it. Played very well last year, very well this year, was starting to earn his stripes in the NBA as one of the top-level players, but it's good that we see this gets caught here, so by next year, hopefully, he's back to 100%, back on the court, rare and ready to go.
So, DRS, we'll talk about the context of San Antonio in those Western Conference standings in just a moment. But Victor Wembanyama has been a very known commodity for quite some time now. The number one overall pick for about a 2-year span. A generational talent. The prince that was promised for the San Antonio Spurs to bring this successful franchise back to the level of the former 2 number one overall picks, the Admiral David Robinson and, of course, Tim Duncan. And Wemby, throughout his rookie season, was good. Toward the tail end of it, he was sensational, living up to that incredible hype. And then this year, rising that play even more so, averaging better than 24 points per game, 11 boards per game, and led the NBA, and it wasn't particularly close, in blocks this season, in blocks per game on average. He had also played, because anytime you see a guy who's 7'4", with the frame that Victor Wembanyama has, in the heat of NBA competition night in, night out, you worry about injuries. But he has not really been injured throughout his career up until this blood clot incident. He played in 71 games last year during his rookie season. He had played in 46 of 52 entering All-Star weekend and was named an All-Star for the first time in his NBA career. Now he will miss the remainder of this season. But DRS, when we talk about San Antonio, it was important because they had made a big blockbuster move at the deadline. Maybe not just for this year, but for many more years to come. The acquisition of De'Aaron Fox, the pairing of the guard with the front court player in Wemby, who does a little bit of everything. But at the All-Star break, San Antonio was 3.5 games out of even a play-in tournament spot. There was a hope maybe they could rally down the home stretch to try to find their way into that postseason position. More than likely not going to happen now for the Spurs, and obviously something they weighed in making this decision for Victor Wembanyama yesterday.
Yeah, you know what also is interesting, too, because you take a look at, shutting him down for the rest of the season. Like, I've never had a blood clot before and certainly don't know what goes through, but is that something where, you can't work out and you just take medication? Because there's a reason why you don't just take the medication and get right back on the court on the Tuesday night in the NBA and say everything is fine. Yeah. So I just want to see what type of shape he's in. But now you're taking a look at February. Next NBA season not going to take place. Obviously, training camps in October and getting underway in late October and early November for the games itself. So we should be fine. But it is an interesting injury. If you got normal knee surgery, you know what? It's going to be a tough off season, but I can still work my upper body out. I can still work on other things. I actually don't know what the level of activity you're actually allowed to do with the blood clot. Right. So that'll be interesting to watch it play through. But again, world-class healthcare. They'll probably handle it perfectly here. And hopefully he's back ready to go for next season as well.
Hopefully so. And you hope, as San Antonio shared yesterday, and I'm sure Wemby is feeling the same, it's a one-off incident. This is not going to be something that plagues the health of his NBA career. So San Antonio probably not going to factor into that playoff chase, the play-in tournament chase around the Western Conference. A plus 215 price yesterday, even to be a play-in tourney team. That price no longer on the board. Plus 540 to make the playoffs. Again, rather long odds here with less than 30 games remaining in this NBA regular season, now plus 570. But Donnie, probably the most drastic odds movement from the betting perspective on the individual, that is Wemby. He was minus 2,400 to run away with Defensive Player of the Year. He was a very short favorite before this NBA season began and took a lot of money and was going to cash a lot of tickets. But because he has only played 46 games, he is now ineligible, failing to meet that minimum for NBA postseason awards. The favorite now, Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies at plus 125, a nickel in front of Evan Mobley from Cleveland.
Isn't that crazy? Like, you think of ways, like, we understand, like, when you bet in football for the MVP, hey, tore my knee in week 13. Like, oh, he was going to win the MVP. That happens, and those are the expectations. And even in basketball, went up for a shot, landed awkwardly, ended up breaking my ankle out for the season. But the fact of the matter is, like, you are a shoo-in to win this award if you bet it. You had it all the way through the season, and the way you get knocked out is because of a blood clot, not because of actually anything that happened on the court. Those are always the tough ones to certainly recognize. But understand this, too. You see some of those guys, look, Lou Dort and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander popping that. That's two defensive players on one basketball team. Boy, they're playing some D out in OKC, huh?
SGA not just leading the NBA in scoring this year, second in steals per game as well. I believe Wembanyama was minus 140, something of the sort, to win DPOY before the year, and it felt like a good bet. Of course, now not going to win that Hardwood. Action from the NBA next.
I talked about AZ Fun a lot, folks, and said when she got back from that knee injury, remember, it's the second ACL tear she's had in her career, that she was going to be a difference maker. UConn is plus 330. They're not going to get challenged again in the Big East until they come out of conference play in a conference tournament. I still like them at plus 330 to win a national championship.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You watch playoff games. The playoffs are all that matter. The league's got an issue. They just don't want to admit it. They brag about how huge they are, how global they are. Ratings are through the roof. Profits are through the roof. I mean, between the NBA and NHL lying about their ratings and the money they make, I'm sick and tired of it.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
So now to some actual games from the NBA as we are fully back from the All-Star break. A 9-game slate on a Thursday. Donnie, of course, we got the big news that Victor Wembanyama now out for the remainder of this season. It was supposed to be a celebratory night for the Spurs, not in San Antonio, but elsewhere in the Lone Star State, in Austin, as the Spurs were hosting the Suns. A homecoming of sorts for Kevin Durant, back where he spent his only year of college basketball, inside the Moody Center at Texas. But that was also spoiled by San Antonio, even without Wemby, the Spurs win outright by double digits, 120-109 as a 2.5-point underdog. We talked about Victor Wembanyama in the prognosis, DRS, for San Antonio down the home stretch. Could they factor in to the play-in tournament race? There was some optimism because of Wemby, the All-Star, in the big blockbuster deal ahead of the deadline, De'Aaron Fox. Well, De'Aaron Fox showed out last night, 26 points, 9 boards, 7 dimes to lead San Antonio to the outright upset victory against Phoenix.
Yeah, by the way, you take a look at these spread out scoring now. Usually, we'll see how long this is going to last. We usually get that bump like, hey, superstars out, let's everybody, hold down the fort, because everybody that played off the bench, Ben, 15, 12, 15, and 10 points, double digits for every person that came into the game. That's incredible. Now about the starting lineup, 13, 26, 13, and then you start 8 and 8. You almost had every single player on your team get into double digits. You win a lot of basketball games if you do that, but it's more for me that now the Spurs improved to 24 and 29, not necessarily going anywhere this season, even if they had Victor Wembanyama, but more the focus for me turns over to the Phoenix Suns, where 26 and 29, one of those games where, hey, it's going to be a tough game. We understand that it's on the road, but not necessarily in the home arena for the San Antonio Spurs. Best player, get bad news throughout the day. You should win that game. And you end up just getting trounced by double digits once again. It's not working out. And when you say it's like, what's the reason here? Well, Bradley Beal just gave up on the season. He still came off the bench, played 33 minutes and gave you 19 points, 8 of 14 from the floor. Like, it's not even working when your stars are active, healthy, and playing. It's just a disconnect in Phoenix.
All right, what about Devin Booker? 41 minutes and was atrocious from the floor. 5 of 14 and 1 of 5. Or excuse me, I was looking at the wrong box score. 4 of 14, 2 of 7 from the floor. How about KD in his return? Not bad, 39 minutes, 22 points, 9 of 13 from the field. Just not enough for Phoenix. And they don't really have depth outside of those 3 guys, despite the fact that Royce O'Neal was the leading scorer for Phoenix last night. But if KD, D-Book, and Beal are all playing considerable minutes in a game and Royce O'Neal is your leading scorer, that's not a recipe for success for the Suns, who now fall 3 games below 500, 26 and 29. 2 games behind those teams from Northern California, Sacramento and Golden State, for the final 2 spots in the Western Conference play-in tournament. In DRS, the Suns were a slight favorite yesterday in Austin. They continue to be the NBA's worst cover team, 19, 35, and 1 against the spread, which kind of speaks to the Suns team as a whole. When you have expectation and the odds makers are expecting you to win games and win more and perform in a better way, and you are failing on that miserably, of course you're never going to be a successful team or even a playoff team at this moment.
No, certainly. And what's going to actually happen in the offseason as well for Phoenix, where the expectations aren't very high now when they're supposed to be sky high every year with all this talent? Is it Kevin Durant just makes his way to another franchise like Portland and ruins Portland at that point? So who knows what the future holds? But the big question mark is that owner came in and bought that franchise because, you know what, I'm going to deliver for the people. Money is no object here. I'm going to bring in the best talent we absolutely have. We're going to put the big 3 together, and we're going to be just fine. And it's just getting worse and worse by the day out there in Phoenix. There's nothing worse than, and again, I'm living through it a little bit in Philadelphia with the way the 76ers are. Are they supposed to win the NBA title? No, but you're supposed to have a really good team because you're really talented, not the opposite end of the spectrum at this point. It's terrible.
Matt Ishbia, that new owner, was all in for Phoenix, getting Kevin Durant, getting Bradley Beal, keeping Devin Booker in-house. But he's also going to be a businessman at a certain point and be like, this isn't working. I'm not paying all of you. It does seem as though Phoenix is very close to DRS if they even miss out on the playoffs, even as a play-in tourney team not getting to the actual postseason in the NBA. Like, it could look a lot different in the Valley next year for this Suns side. Speaking of wildly disappointing, how about now 15 games sub 500 for the Philadelphia 76ers? 20 and 35. Now, the 76ers were taking on the reigning champs last night in Boston. The C's win, in Philadelphia. They win by 20, that being the Celtics, 124-104. But Boston covers as a 7-point road favorite, and everybody played for the 76ers. Donnie's reactions to bad Philly ball next.
I guess this is the battle for second place in the NBA's MVP. It's been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was like minus 250 a couple months ago. Then last month it was 3-1. It's now up to minus 440 here.
Voter fatigue is a real thing, but there is a chance for him to maybe go on a hot tear, go on a stretch that maybe opens the conversation back up a little bit. I wouldn't say Shai's completely out of the woods just yet.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
You watch playoff games. The playoffs are all that matter. The league's got an issue. They just don't want to admit it. They brag about how huge they are, how global they are. Ratings are through the roof. Profits are through the roof. I mean, between the NBA and NHL lying about their ratings and the money they make, I'm sick and tired of it.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I talked about AZ Fun a lot, folks, and said when she got back from that knee injury, remember, it's the second ACL tear she's had in her career, that she was going to be a difference maker. UConn is plus 330. They're not going to get challenged again in the Big East until they come out of conference play in the conference tournament. I still like them at plus 330 to win a national championship.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
It might be time very soon in Phoenix to say goodbye to the KD, D-Book, and Bradley Beal era. I don't know exactly what they're going to do in Philadelphia, but 15 games under 500 with everybody in the lineup at home last night? Oh boy, it has not been good for the 76ers. A 20-point win for the Celtics. Now that's going to happen. Boston is the NBA championship favorites. Boston now has 40 wins this year. The C's are the reigning NBA title winners. But Donnie, when you can ill afford to lose many more games and you're a 7-point home dog and can't even keep it close nor competitive, you've got some really big issues in Philadelphia. What's your takeaway from the Sixers losing yet again last night by a very large margin?
Yeah, we talked about on the show yesterday the future of the Sixers, and I'm talking about the immediate future of the Sixers is I think the organization probably understands, Embiid's banged up, wasn't a great year for Paul George. Even though he was decent last night, 29 minutes, 17 points, but still a minus 24 overall, which just about every one of those starters was. But I think the organization is going to give them a chance to rally themselves to try to make a playoff run, just because that's what you do in the NBA. You have a high talented roster here. If there's a chance to make the NBA playoffs, you're going to make it. It's not necessarily a tanking season, or at least they thought of coming into it, right? But it's been a disaster. Now you're at the point we're saying, well, Joel Embiid is not going to help us down the stretch because whether he's healthy and this lineup is healthy, it makes no difference. Like, hey, before the All-Star break, we won 7 out of 8 games. No, you didn't. You tanked right into the All-Star game, and then you got rested where you didn't have any All-Stars per se, particularly Joel Embiid, to get ready to come back on your home court. You got blasted in the first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter. You lost by 20 points overall, and after the game, Joel Embiid is saying, like, yeah, I can't dominate. My knee hurts. So get ready, Sixers fans here, for the tank for the rest of the season to see if they can stay in that top 6 to get their first-round pick, get McCain back from who looked like having a very good rookie season, and then move forward from there. Because this year, it's already a wrap on the Sixers. They might as well pull the plug right now and lose as many games as possible.
DRS, I thought your assessment at the All-Star break as we looked at the standings and talked about some of these very underwhelming teams in the opening half of this year. Phoenix in the Western Conference, namely the 76ers out east. You said it's not a matter of talent or even availability. If the Sixers can factor into that play-in tournament conversation in the Eastern Conference to maybe nab and steal a playoff spot, they can do that. If they get into the play-in tournament, they'll be booked as a favorite against every other team in the play-in tournament field as of right now. Everybody under 500 in the Eastern Conference. But if they do not turn things around quickly, the Sixers might shut it down. They might say it's not worth it to have Joel Embiid out there to maybe, just maybe, win 2 play-in tourney games and then be the 8th seed and then get hammered by the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Boston Celtics. That seems like what we are going to see here very shortly. Again, every guy that you could hope for in Philadelphia, PG, JoJo, Maxey in the starting 5 last night, every guy scored at least 15 points, but not enough to beat the Celtics. Game's leading scorer, Peyton Pritchard off the bench for the C's, 28 points. Let's go elsewhere, out to the Rose City in Portland. The Lakers on the second leg of a back-to-back, of course, playing in that standalone game to return the NBA from the All-Star break on Wednesday night at home. Disappointing loss as a double-digit home favorite against the Charlotte Hornets. Donnie, as we sat here yesterday around 10 a.m. Eastern time for a game that would not tip for 12 hours up in Portland, we were a little bit skeptical that the Lakers would have both LeBron and Luka in the lineup. They were only a 3.5-point favorite against the Trailblazers. Luka didn't play, still trying to nurse that calf injury and return. Not exactly the best look. LeBron James did play, and at the age of 40, yet another 40-point performance to lead LA to a victory up in Portland, 110-102, the victory for the Lake Show over the Blazers. 40 points for LeBron, his second 40-point performance at the age of 40. DRS, the first player in the NBA to turn 40 and score multiple 40-point games.
Yeah, he's been amazing throughout his career. And also, we were worried about would both of those superstar players, as you said, for the Lakers, even make the trip to Portland and play, which they did. And by the way, Portland, you had to know the second half was absolutely starting. Because why? You scored 15 points in the first quarter. That's not good enough. So 28-15 right away when you're supposed to be the young, rested team, when an older veteran team without all of their starters come to town here, that's an embarrassing performance. So this game did get real close here late by the third quarter. Good for the Lakers pulling it out, winning the fourth quarter by 7 points and winning the game by 8 points overall. But LeBron James, he is a wonder, man. 40 points at that age, carrying that team, because it starts to look like, hey, you know what? L.A. is full of superstars. My man won with Jackson Hayes, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Dorian Finney-Smith. And he goes, you know what? I'll play the 36 minutes. I'll take 24 shots. I'll score 40 points here. I got to do something to help these guys out.
32 points for Austin Reeves as well. The Lakers, a big victory. They cover as a 3.5-point road favorite. Now 16, 15, and 1 against the spread. Portland, one of those teams, DRS, booked as an underdog basically in every game. 52 of 56 now. They are 31, 21, and 1 against the spread. No, the Blazers are not going to win many games outright, but one of those teams here down the stretch run, still playing competitive basketball to know from your handicapping perspective. Regular season game, 1,542 for LeBron James, moving past Vince Carter for the third most all time. I think it's way too early, and I think LeBron understands that Luka Doncic is still getting ready to go, coming back from the calf injury that had sidelined him for more than a month. He had not played since Christmas, before his debut, before the All-Star break with the Lakers. But do you think he looks around at Luka and is like, maybe the conditioning thing is actually something we got to work through here, buddy, to make sure that if I'm 40 years old and playing on the second leg of a back-to-back, that you at 25 years old can give it a go?
Yeah, LeBron goes back to the hyperbaric chamber after the game, gets the cold tub, makes sure he's ready. And Luka probably has a six-pack of beer, some spaghetti and meatballs after the game. Like, okay, when do we play tomorrow, and show up here? So maybe some of that stuff rubs out, because the one thing you do know is I'm sure Luka tries to get in the best condition he can. But sometimes he just takes a look at, hey, I came over to a new organization. Hey, LeBron, show me what you actually do. It's like, wow, that is a big sacrifice. So you can play all of these years and be at the top level of your game for just about on a night-to-night basis. Maybe some of that does rub off on Luka, and it really works out, because when you're in Dallas, you are the king there. Like, hey, I'm not listening to anybody else. When you come over to L.A., you're actually playing with the king there, and he's going to tell you what you need to do.
33-21, the record now for L.A., a half game behind Houston for what would be the 4 seed in the NBA's Western Conference. Important to potentially host the opening round of the playoffs. The L.A. Clippers on the road last night as an ever so slight favorite in Milwaukee, but it featured the return of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who had missed the final few games for the Bucks ahead of the All-Star break. And with Giannis back in the lineup, and a 23-point and 8-rebound performance, and getting at least 13 points from every other starter as well. The Bucks win outright at home, 116-110 over LA.
You know why they didn't win, Ben. You know why the Clippers didn't win. I looked at this final score, woke up in the morning, and I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I thought the Clippers would handle their business. So the next thing I went to do was like, how many had three-point shots my guy Norm Powell makes? So I go, all right, Kawhi Leonard started, Zubac, Harden, Coffee. Nope, no wonder. You got no shot when my guy's not playing in games here. Until you see the man, the myth, the legend, Norm Powell in the court, you can't bet against him or bet with him. So there you go. Clippers lost. Why? Norm Powell didn't play. Simple handicap. That's it.
Norm Powell did not play last night, and despite 25 points from Kawhi Leonard, still doesn't matter. Powell is the best player in Los Angeles. James Harden? Yeah, right. Kawhi, I'm sure if he's even out there. Norman Powell is the truth. Donnie, he had props for us yesterday as we were breaking down the game. It's how we try to track availability here on the early line, a late scratch. 18-12 now for the Clippers against the spread as a favorite. Still one of 4 teams around the NBA covering in at least 55% of their games booked as the favorite side. Even without Giannis entering the All-Star break, the Bucks won 2 of their final 3 games outright as a dog. They win last night, still outright as a very slight underdog at home inside the Pfizer Forum. We'll talk about a couple other games from the association. Again, a 9-game slate on a Thursday to get us underway for the stretch run in the NBA after the All-Star break. 250 was the total in Indy. Did it go over or under? Find out next.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You watch playoff games. The playoffs are all that matter. The league's got an issue. They just don't want to admit it. They brag about how huge they are, how global they are. Ratings are through the roof. Profits are through the roof. I mean, between the NBA and NHL lying about their ratings and the money they make, I'm sick and tired of it.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I guess this is the battle for second place in the NBA's MVP. It's been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was like minus 250 a couple months ago. Then last month it was 3-1. He's now up to minus 440 here.
Voter fatigue is a real thing, but there is a chance for him to maybe go on a hot tear, go on a stretch that maybe opens the conversation back up a little bit. I wouldn't say Shai's completely out of the woods just yet.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
A 9-game slate around the NBA on a Thursday evening to break down for you on a Friday morning. DRS, one of the games we previewed yesterday in Indianapolis between the Pacers and the Grizz, 2 teams in the top 4 of their respective conference standings. But what really caught our attention was a total for the first game for both of these clubs out of the All-Star break. Not at 230 or 240, 250 was the closing number last night in Indy between the Grizzlies and the Pacers. And let me tell you, it was a high-scoring game. It got 240 points. and it still stayed under as the Pacers get a big home win as an underdog slightly, outright as a 2-point dog, 127-113 against Memphis.
Yeah, it's pretty wild because we talked about how high that number was. And if you would have said before the game, hey, I'm just going to tell you one statistic. One of these teams is going to score 50 points in a quarter. You'd be like, all right, that's it. Enough. I'm taking the over because that means they absolutely steamrolled through it. 33-28. Decent scoring first quarter. Second quarter, 50-26. Now you're rolling, but then the bottom dropped out on the Pacers offense in the second half. 24 points in the third, 25 points in the fourth quarter. And then you saw the Grizzlies with a 22-point fourth quarter there. So coming off of the All-Star break, the vibes were high, as we like to say, in the first half. But boy, they crashed down a little bit in the second half. But that's a great win for the Pacers. Double digits over the Grizzlies, one of the better teams in the NBA. But I think everybody was on the same page saying, boy, that number is high right out of the break. If it hits, so be it. Not really an X's and O's handicap, but more of like everything's got to go right for guys that have been off for a week. And look, everything didn't go right, and that game stayed under.
I think you could still argue everything did go right, and it only had 240 points. It wasn't like this was a defensive slugfest. It wasn't even like two teams didn't get to 110. The Pacers scored 127 points. And we were still double-digit points away from that total. For Indiana, though, big victory last night. The Pacers now 31-23 straight up. DRS, Indiana, the only team in the NBA that has an outright winning record as an underdog. Now 12-11 straight up. Two of these teams not just expected to score. The Pacers entered the break going over in 7 of their last 10. Memphis, second highest over percentage in the NBA entering last night. But two teams really good where they are in terms of the spread. Memphis was the best cover team as a favorite entering last night, 24-11 against the spread. And as we shared, the Pacers, the only team around the association with a winning record outright when booked as an underdog. The New York Knicks, double-digit home favorite inside the Mecca last night, laying 12 points against the Chicago Bulls. New York, 25-22-1 against the spread as a favorite this year. Now make that 25-23-1 ATS. The Knicks do get a home victory outright in OT, 113-111 over Chicago. But the reason I chuckled, DRS, is because we were breaking down this game yesterday. And we asked, would Tom Thibodeau play all of his guys 35, 40-plus minutes, knowing they host the Cleveland Cavaliers in a huge matchup around the Eastern Conference on this Friday? They had to go to overtime to get a 2-point win over Chicago.
Yeah, it makes it even worse, too, because we thought the NBA sometimes would be smarter on their scheduling, where it's like, okay, both the teams in New York City play back-to-back. They'll both play in New York City. Game's actually in Cleveland tonight. Like, both of these teams now have to fly back, which makes it even worse for the New York Knicks. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on the stat line right now.
Read that wrong. My bad.
Cleveland. I have Cleveland as an 8.5-point favorite. Yeah, I have an 8.5-point favorite Cleveland at home on my odds board. Is that wrong?
No, you're right. I swear I saw yesterday.
Yeah.
I swear I saw yesterday this game was in New York.
Yeah, which, again, would have made a lot more sense for the NBA to say, hey, let me help the teams out as opposed to having them both in New York City and fly back to Cleveland for a game, which is why that line is so high. But you're right. Like Tibbs, and you talk about like Josh Hart's having knee problems because he plays just too much. So, okay, how do I handle that situation? I have 4 guys coming off the bench. One guy got 1 minute in the game. The other guy's got 17, but 46, 44, 43, 38, and 42. And then back-to-back here going against Cleveland. That's just terrible. On an overtime game, stop it, Tom. Stop.
Karl Anthony Towns, 32 points, 18 boards, continues to deliver for the New York Knicks. Donnie, I almost feel like common sense warped our brains to think this game was inside the Garden tonight. Big arena, Friday night, at home in the city for the Knicks. If the Cavs were playing on the second leg of a back-to-back somewhere else on the road and went back to Cleveland, fine. They were in Detroit. They were in Milwaukee. Heck, they were on the West Coast for whatever reason. But why would you have the Cavs play in Brooklyn? The Knicks at home in the Garden to send both teams back to the land for this Friday night huge game between the Knicks and the Cavaliers. Speaking of Cleveland, 13-point road favorite in Brooklyn against the Nets, and they win by exactly 13. 110-97, the victory for the Cavs before they boarded the plane and headed back to the land.
Yeah, maybe they drove over to Madison Square Garden and tried to check back into their hotels. Like, no, you're in Cleveland. Like, hey, I watched the early line yesterday. I thought we were staying in our same hotel tonight at this point, so rightfully so. But that's a good win for the Cavaliers over a bad Nets team. And you talk about the minutes played here on back-to-backs. Look at the starters there, 30. 25, 29, 30, and 24. Yeah. More balanced attack here, which is why that line opened up at 7.5, and I believe currently sits at 8.5 tonight as a favorite for the Cavaliers over the Knicks. Because why? Wear and tear, home team, less attrition on the Cavaliers coming into tonight.
35-19-1 against the spread. The Cavs not only the best record in the NBA now at 45-10. We'll see OKC tonight, but 45-10 for the Cavaliers. Also the best cover team in the NBA, 35-19-1 against the number. But the Nets, much like the Blazers, much like the Hornets who covered last night in Denver despite losing by 14. The Nugs, by the way, have won 9 consecutive games. Denver now the 2 seed in the Western Conference, half-game advantage over the Memphis Grizzlies as the Grizz struggle in Indianapolis. The Nets are a pretty good cover team. 47 of 55 games booked as an underdog, 21-1 against the spread. From the handicapping perspective, things to know down the stretch. So Cleveland at home, 8.5-point favorite tonight, total 240 and a hook. Both teams well under yesterday. Both now having it. I wonder if they were on the same flight or they passed by each other in the air as they left last night. 8.5-point spread, Donnie. This is Tibbs, though. Like, Tibbs looks at his guys and say, I don't care. We played in overtime. I don't care that the NBA screwed us over with this scheduling error. We are going to win this game. We'll talk about more previews later on. NFL news and notes next.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You watch playoff games. The playoffs are all that matter. The league's got an issue. They just don't want to admit it. They brag about how huge they are, how global they are. Ratings are through the roof. Profits are through the roof. I mean, between the NBA and NHL lying about their ratings and the money they make, I'm sick and tired of it.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I guess this is the battle for second place in the NBA's MVP. It's been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was like minus 250 a couple months ago. Then last month it was 3-1. He's now up to minus 440 here.
Voter fatigue is a real thing, but there is a chance for him to maybe go on a hot tear, go on a stretch that maybe opens the conversation back up a little bit. I wouldn't say Shai's completely out of the woods just yet.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
An all-pro career has now come to an end around the National Football League, but the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, probably on the other side. Dallas's guard, Zach Martin, after 11 years in the NFL, all inside Jerry World, he is now retiring from the NFL. 11 seasons, DRS, 7-time AP first-team All-Pro performer, 9-time Pro Bowler. And as we shared at the start of the show, a stat that made its way around social media yesterday that truly is mind-boggling, but speaks not only to the consistency, but the high level of play for Zach Martin. More Pro Bowl nods, 9, than accepted holding penalties called against Martin, 7 in his 11-year NFL career.
Yeah, one of the best to ever do it. There's no question about it. And this also signified, like the Dallas Cowboys shifting as we're going to be really good drafters, particularly in the first round, by taking the best player available, regardless of the position. And that was one of those positions that's not sexy. Like, hey, we got to fix our offensive line. You want the big-time wideout, the running back, the quarterback. But just taking really good offensive linemen had paid off in spades there. And Zach Martin, as we said, over the past 11 years, none better here. But the NFL, there's physicality. And certainly from that position there, you get banged up, it's hard to recover the older you get. Kudos to a great career for Zach Martin, man. Other than winning like winning a Super Bowl at that point, he really did it all in the NFL.
Yes, he certainly did. First-round pick, 16th overall in the 2014 NFL Draft out of Notre Dame, as our producer Joe Frizo dug up yesterday. The 2013 Pinstripe Bowl MVP award winner, the first offensive lineman to win an MVP of a bowl game since 1959. Not sure it's been done since. That is the strength of Zach Martin. Donnie, you want to know how good Zach Martin was as well? His rookie season, 2014 for the Cowboys, Pro Bowler, AP first-team All-Pro. That's pretty impressive. Started and played all 16 games at the right guard spot. Also finished runner-up in Offensive Rookie of the Year. As an offensive guard, as an O-lineman. Again, he should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer to Canton, but certainly will be wearing a gold jacket one day.
No doubt about it. And that's pretty crazy because it makes me think like how dominant he was, but also how terrible is that rookie class? Did everybody blow out their knee as opposed to 2 players in the first round for that season? It's pretty incredible. But offensive line, get their kudos, man. You just watched the Philadelphia Eagles walk to a Super Bowl. Why? Because their offensive line was absolutely dominant here. That's going to hurt the Dallas Cowboys. Going to have to reload at that offensive line position. But for 11 years, knowing that you probably have the best guard in football, that's a pretty good luxury.
Honestly, a pretty good rookie class. Odell Beckham Jr. won Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2014. The guy who finished in third, Mike Evans. So eat your words, DRS. Speaking of a good interior offensive lineman, the center for Philadelphia, Cam Jurgens, who dealt with a back injury throughout that playoff run, but of course started and played well in Super Bowl 59, as everybody did, for the Eagles, undergoing a procedure on his back, but all indications, DRS, he will be ready for training camp.
Yeah, one of the better centers in the NFL. And by the way, I can still remember on NFC Championship Sunday, just driving home, picking up a pizza and a cheesesteak, and realizing that Cam Jurgens wasn't playing in that game. Like, oh, of course he's not playing. A big, tough offensive lineman can't gut this one out here. But understanding, has anybody ever had a back problem and how debilitating that can actually be? The fact that he wasn't supposed to play in that game, Landon Dickerson got hurt, and he came in and then goes in the Super Bowl. I'm fine. It's only one more game. I can gut this out against Chris Jones and the Kansas City Chiefs. Impressive performance, world champion here. Rest up, my king.
Absolutely so. Head back to Beatrice, Nebraska. Maybe worry about the livestock a little bit as you're getting ready. What?
Not Beatrice?
See? That's where you'd be wrong. And that's where it'd be very clear to see that Donnie Rightside is the East Coast elite, not me. Cut my teeth in Omaha. What?
Yeah.
Beat Rice.
Not Beat Rice, Beatrice.
Like CJ beat Hart. Anyway, as we keep going, DRS, a guy that was also a part of that Super Bowl winning Philadelphia side this year, Doug Nussmeier, quarterbacks coach in Philly this year, going to follow Kellen Moore to New Orleans. Doug Nussmeier now named the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints, the new offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, they rated the Philadelphia Eagles, and rightfully so. When you're comfortable with working guys and you have success there, you're going to take them there. I always remember when Andy Reid was in Philadelphia, boy, his coaching tree is long. He used to basically tell them, you're going to get a head coaching job. You are not allowed to take anybody off of this staff, so good luck into the future. It's not the case around the league anymore at that point.
Yeah, and these two guys, Doug Nussmeier and Kellen Moore, have worked together well before Philadelphia. They were together in L.A. They were together in Dallas for the entirety of Moore's tenure there. Doug Nussmeier, father of Garrett Nussmeier, LSU starting quarterback in the Heisman Trophy favorite entering 2025. Elijah Molden signs an extension with the Chargers as well. The safety, a 3-year, nearly $19 million deal. That's the offseason. Hour number 2 up next.